Ladies and gentlemen, the time has come to reevaluate what it means to truly stand in your power, to reassess the way you navigate relationships and interactions. For too long, many of us have confused being kind, respectful, and considerate with being overly accommodating, overly apologetic, and overly eager to please. There's a difference between being a person of integrity and allowing yourself to become a doormat for others to walk on. It's not your job to shrink yourself, to suppress your voice, or to compromise your values just to make someone else comfortable. If you're constantly bending over backward to be what someone else wants you to be, you're not walking in the purpose God has called you to. Let's get something straight. Being nice is not the same thing as being virtuous. Being polite, considerate, or even generous is good, but when your kindness becomes an open invitation for others to misuse you, it's time to take a step back and realign your priorities. You were not created to be liked by everyone. You were created to fulfill a divine purpose, and sometimes that means standing firm in the face of opposition. Sometimes that means saying no when everything in your people-pleasing nature wants to say yes. Sometimes that means letting people misunderstand you rather than compromising your values to fit into their narrative. God never called you to be a peacekeeper at the expense of your own peace. He called you to be a peacemaker. And there's a difference. Peacekeepers avoid conflict at all costs, even if it means sacrificing their own well-being. Peacemakers confront issues head-on, operating in truth and love, seeking to establish real peace, even if it's uncomfortable. You don't serve anyone, including yourself, by silencing your voice or pretending to be okay with things that violate your boundaries, your values, or your sense of self-worth. When you prioritize being nice over being honest, you rob yourself of authentic connections and meaningful relationships. People can only respect you to the extent that you respect yourself. If you're constantly putting others' needs above your own, if you're always the one giving, always the one apologizing, always the one compromising, what you're teaching others is that your feelings, your boundaries, and your worth don't matter. But I came here to tell you today that you matter. Your voice matters. Your needs matter. And it's time to stop betraying yourself in the name of being nice. Being a person of faith, being a person of integrity, doesn't mean you have to be a people pleaser. Jesus himself wasn't always nice in the way we think of niceness today. He didn't shy away from speaking truth, even when it upset people. He didn't hesitate to challenge systems, to confront hypocrisy, or to disrupt the status quo. He operated in love, yes, but he also operated in authority and truth. He knew his mission, and he didn't let the opinions of others derail him from fulfilling his purpose. If Jesus didn't live his life trying to make everyone happy, why should you? There are moments in life when you have to step out of your nice persona and step into your God-given authority. There are moments when you have to stand up for what you believe in, even if it makes others uncomfortable. There are moments when you have to set boundaries, even if it means disappointing people. And there are moments when you have to choose yourself, your health, your peace, your purpose over the expectations and demands of others. Stop being so concerned with what people think of you. Stop worrying about whether they'll like you or approve of you. People's opinions are fickle, but God's purpose for your life is eternal. If you're constantly chasing the approval of man, you'll never have the clarity or the courage to walk in what God has called you to. You'll be too busy trying to fit into molds that were never meant for you, too busy trying to meet standards that were never set by God, and too busy trying to appease people who were never meant to have that much influence in your life. You are not called to please man, you are called to please God. And sometimes pleasing God means disappointing people. Sometimes pleasing God means standing alone, walking away, or letting go. Sometimes pleasing God means choosing truth over comfort, obedience over popularity, and purpose over acceptance. But let me tell you something, when you make the decision to prioritize God's will for your life over man's opinions, you will walk in a freedom and a peace that surpasses all understanding. You will walk with a confidence that comes not from the approval of others, but from the assurance that you are exactly where God wants you to be. There's a strength that comes from knowing who you are and whose you are and whose you are. When you understand that your worth is not determined by how many people like you, how many people agree with you, or how many people think you're nice, you stop giving your power away. You stop trying to earn validation from people who don't have the capacity to see your worth. And you stop shrinking yourself to fit into spaces that were never meant for you. God has called you to something greater than being nice. He has called you to be strong, to be bold, to be courageous, and to be unapologetically who He created you to be. That doesn't mean you have to be harsh or unkind. It doesn't mean you have to lose your compassion or your grace. But it does mean that you have to stop letting people take advantage of you, manipulate you, or diminish you. It means you have to learn how to say no without guilt and how to say yes without fear. It means you have to learn how to protect your peace, guard your heart, and prioritize your purpose. There's a divine confidence that comes from knowing that you are walking in alignment with God's will. When you operate from that place of confidence, you don't feel the need to prove yourself to anyone. You don't feel the need to explain yourself or justify your decisions. You don't feel the need to apologize for being who you are or for standing in your truth. You simply walk in the authority that God has given you, knowing that you are enough just as you are. So stop being nice to the point of betraying yourself. Stop being nice to the point of compromising your values. Stop being nice to the point of losing sight of who you are. Instead, be kind, be compassionate, be loving. But also be bold, be honest, be authentic, and most importantly, be aligned with the purpose that God has placed on your life. You don't have to choose between being kind and being strong. You can be both. You can walk in love and still set boundaries. You can operate in grace and still demand respect. You can be a person of faith and still stand in your power. This is your time to step into the fullness of who you are. This is your time to stop shrinking, stop apologizing, and stop compromising. This is your time to walk in the authority that God has given you to speak your truth and to live your life unapologetically. God didn't create you to blend in or to fade into the background. He created you to shine, to stand out, and to make an impact. So stop settling for less than what you deserve. Stop dimming your light to make others comfortable. And stop being nice in a way that diminishes your worth. You are a child of God, fearfully and wonderfully made. And it's time for you to start living like it. Ooh, kindness is an expression of strength, not weakness. It's not about how much you can endure, how far you can bend, or how much you can give at the expense of your own well-being. For too long, the world has equated being nice with being self-sacrificing in unhealthy ways, often expecting people to neglect their own needs, boundaries, and desires to accommodate others. But that is not what God intended for you. Being kind does not mean being a doormat. It does not mean allowing others to misuse you to take advantage of your time, your energy, or your compassion. God never called you to live a life where your light's dim so others can shine. When you redefine niceness, you realize that it is possible to be kind and strong at the same time. You don't have to choose one over the other. Kindness comes from a place of love, not fear. It comes from a desire to uplift others, not from an obligation to please them. When kindness flows from a heart rooted in God's love, it is powerful, transformative, and uplifting. But when it stems from a fear of rejection, a need for approval, or a reluctance to stand firm, it becomes a counterfeit version of the strength God has given you. The Bible calls us to love our neighbors as ourselves, but too often people forget the second part of that command, to love yourself. Loving yourself means respecting the boundaries God has placed in your life. It means acknowledging that you are just as worthy of care, kindness, and respect as the people you serve. If your version of niceness causes you to repeatedly put others' needs above your own to the point of exhaustion, resentment, or feeling undervalued, then it is not kindness, it is self-neglect. God's design for your life doesn't include diminishing yourself for the sake of others. Establishing boundaries is an essential part of walking in kindness with strength. Boundaries are not walls to shut people out. They are safeguards to protect what God has entrusted to you. They allow you to serve from a place of fullness rather than depletion. When you set boundaries, you communicate to others and to yourself that your time, energy, and emotional well-being are valuable. You teach others how to treat you by how you treat yourself. If you don't respect your own boundaries, how can you expect others to? Some people may push back against your boundaries, especially if they've benefited from your lack of them in the past. But their discomfort is not your responsibility. Your responsibility is to honor God's purpose for your life, and that requires discernment about how you spend your resources, your time, your energy, and your gifts. Just as Jesus took time away from the crowds to pray and recharge, you too need moments of rest and renewal. Even the Savior of the world didn't say yes to everyone and everything. He operated with divine purpose, focusing on what truly mattered. And so should you. Kindness with boundaries also allows you to operate in truth. You don't have to agree with everything someone says to be kind. You don't have to stay silent when something is wrong to maintain peace. Real kindness sometimes requires confrontation, honesty, and saying no when necessary. It means caring enough about others to hold them accountable while caring enough about yourself to stand firm in your values. It is not cruel or selfish to prioritize what God has placed in your heart. In fact, it's an act of obedience to His calling on your life. When you redefine niceness, you free yourself from the trap of people-pleasing. People-pleasing is exhausting because it places your sense of worth in the hands of others. It's an endless cycle of seeking approval, bending to meet expectations, and fearing rejection. But God didn't create you to be controlled by the opinions of others. Operating in kindness with strength doesn't mean you will always be understood or appreciated. Some people may misinterpret your boundaries as selfishness. Others may try to guilt you into overextending yourself. But remember, your identity is not tied to their perceptions. It is rooted in God's truth. When you align your actions with His will, you can walk with peace, knowing that you are doing what He has called you to do. The world doesn't need more people who are nice at the expense of their own joy and purpose. It needs people who are kind, strong, and unapologetically walking in their God-given identity. Kindness with strength requires courage. It takes bravery to say no when you've been conditioned to always say yes. It takes boldness to speak your truth in love, even when it might upset others. It takes faith to trust that setting boundaries will lead to healthier relationships and a more fulfilling life. But when you operate from this place of strength, you inspire others to do the same. You show them what it looks like to live with integrity, to love with sincerity, and to honor the unique purpose God has placed within you. Your value does not hinge on the approval of others. Too often we fall into the trap of chasing after validation from people who were never meant to define our worth. We seek applause, affirmation, or acceptance from the world around us, believing that if others approve of us, then we must be doing something right. But that's a dangerous cycle. A treadmill that keeps you running but never allows you to arrive. You cannot find lasting fulfillment in the opinions of people because their perceptions are fickle and fleeting. What they praise today, they may criticize tomorrow. What they love about you in one moment may be the very thing they despise in the next. This is why you must look higher. You must anchor your sense of worth in God, not in man. God's love for you is unchanging, unwavering, and unconditional. He saw your value before you were even formed in your mother's womb. Before you spoke a word, before you accomplished a single thing, He deemed you worthy. He called you fearfully and wonderfully made. This means that your worth is intrinsic. It is not tied to what you do or how others perceive you. When you begin to embrace this truth, you stop living for the applause of the crowd and start living for the audience of one. You stop asking, do they like me, and start asking, am I pleasing to God? The need for human approval can be a subtle form of idolatry. When you prioritize what people think of you over what God has called you to do, you place their opinions on a pedestal that only God should occupy. This can lead to compromise as you adjust your actions, your words, or even your identity to fit into someone else's mold. But let me tell you, God didn't create you to be a chameleon, blending into every environment just to avoid rejection. He created you to stand out, to be a light in the darkness, to walk boldly in your purpose without apology. If you spend your life trying to fit into everyone else's expectations, you will never have the freedom to fulfill the unique calling God has placed on your life. When you seek God's approval above all else, you begin to live authentically. You stop pretending to be something you're not just to gain favor. You stop shrinking your dreams, silencing your voice, or hiding your gifts because they make others uncomfortable. You start living in alignment with the truth of who you are, and in doing so, you experience a level of peace and joy that human approval could never provide. Pleasing God often requires stepping away from the crowd, and that can feel lonely at times. But it is far better to walk alone with God than to be surrounded by people who do not understand or respect your purpose. The fear of rejection is one of the greatest barriers to living a purpose-driven life. It keeps you small, keeps you quiet, keeps you from stepping out in faith. But rejection from man is not the end of the story. It's often the beginning of a redirection from God. When people walk away, when doors close, or when you're misunderstood, don't see it as a failure. See it as God clearing the path for what He has next for you. Not everyone is meant to go with you to the next level. Not everyone will understand the calling on your life, and that's okay. Their rejection is not a reflection of your worth. It's a reflection of their capacity. Walking in God's approval requires courage because it won't always be popular. You may be criticized, ridiculed, or even ostracized for standing firm in your faith and your values. But the opinions of others pale in comparison to the rewards of pleasing God. His approval is eternal, His favor is life-changing, and His plans for you are good. When you trust in His validation, you realize that you don't need everyone to agree with you. You don't need everyone to like you. You don't need everyone to understand you. What you need is to stay faithful to what He has called you to do. Choosing God's approval over people's opinions frees you from the exhausting cycle of people pleasing. It allows you to live with clarity and focus, knowing that your worth and purpose are secure in Him. It also empowers you to make decisions with integrity, even when they're difficult. You no longer have to second guess yourself, wondering if you've upset someone or let them down. Instead, you can move forward with confidence, knowing that you're walking in obedience to God's will. The approval of man is temporary, but the approval of God is eternal. When you align yourself with His plans, you're investing in something that lasts far beyond this life. You're storing up treasures in heaven rather than chasing fleeting applause on earth. You're building a legacy that reflects His glory, not your own. And in the end, that's what truly matters, not how many people liked you, but how faithfully you fulfilled the purpose He placed within you. Boldness and authenticity are not just personal traits, they are spiritual mandates. God did not create you to live in fear or to hide behind a facade to make others comfortable. He crafted you with a unique voice, a distinct purpose, and a light that is meant to shine brightly, not be dimmed to fit into someone else's expectations. Too often, people confuse being bold with being abrasive or being authentic with being selfish, but the truth is boldness and authenticity are rooted in living a life that reflects God's truth and purpose for you without apology or pretense. Living authentically begins with knowing who you are in Christ. When you understand that you are fearfully and wonderfully made, you stop comparing yourself to others or trying to imitate them. Comparison is a thief of joy and a distraction from your divine assignment. God didn't make a mistake when he created you. He didn't overlook anything or make you less than anyone else. The gifts, talents, and personality traits you possess are intentionally designed to equip you for your unique calling. Embracing your authenticity means rejecting the lie that you need to be someone else to be accepted, loved, or valued. Boldness flows from authenticity. When you know who you are and whose you are, you can stand confidently in your truth, even in the face of opposition. Being bold doesn't mean being loud or aggressive. It means having the courage to act in alignment with your convictions, even when it's uncomfortable or unpopular. Boldness is the strength to say yes to God's calling, even when it requires you to step out of your comfort zone or go against the grain. It's the willingness to speak up when others stay silent, to act when others hesitate, and to trust God when others doubt. Authenticity and boldness require you to confront fear. Fear is one of the enemy's greatest tools to keep you from living fully and freely in your purpose. Fear of rejection, fear of failure, fear of being misunderstood, these are all lies designed to hold you back. But the Bible reminds us that God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind. Fear may whisper that you're not enough, but faith declares that you are more than a conqueror. Fear may try to silence you, but faith empowers you to speak with authority. Fear may try to convince you to stay small, but faith calls you to expand and grow into the person God created you to be. Walking in boldness and authenticity also means being willing to disappoint people. You cannot please everyone, and you were never meant to. Sometimes your boldness will challenge others. Your authenticity may make them uncomfortable because it forces them to confront their own insecurities or limitations, but you cannot dim your light to make someone else feel better about their darkness. You cannot shrink who you are to fit into someone else's limited vision of you. The world needs your full, unapologetic self, because that is how God's glory is revealed through you. Living boldly and authentically requires discernment. Not everyone deserves access to the depths of who you are. Jesus himself was intentional about the people he surrounded himself with. He had the crowds, the disciples, and then his inner circle. He loved everyone, but he didn't give everyone the same level of access. You too must be wise about where and with whom you share your boldness and authenticity. Not everyone will understand your journey, and that's okay. The responsibility is not to be understood by everyone, but to be faithful to God's calling. Boldness and authenticity also mean being willing to take risks. Growth and transformation often requires stepping into the unknown, trusting that God will guide and sustain you. The journey won't always be easy, but it will be worth it. You may face criticism, setbacks, or even failure, but those moments are not the end of your story. They are stepping stones to greater strength, wisdom, and purpose. Boldness allows you to see obstacles as opportunities, and authenticity gives you the resilience to keep going when the path gets tough. Your boldness and authenticity are not just for you, they are a testimony to others. When you live courageously and authentically, you inspire those around you to do the same. You become a beacon of hope, showing others that it is possible to live fully, freely, and faithfully. Your courage gives them permission to be courageous. Your authenticity encourages them to embrace their own truth. And in doing so, you create a ripple effect that impacts lives far beyond your own. God has called you to be both bold and authentic because that is how you reflect his image. He is a God of truth, a God of purpose, and a God of power. When you align yourself with his nature, you become a vessel for his glory. You don't have to pretend to be someone you're not to serve him or to fulfill your calling. He wants you to bring your whole authentic self to the table because that is where your true power lies. Boundaries are not walls meant to keep people out. They are gates designed to protect what God has entrusted to you. They safeguard your time, your energy, your peace, and your purpose. Too often we allow others to overstep into spaces where they were never meant to be, all in the name of being kind, being available, or being liked. But when you say yes to everyone else, you often say no to yourself and to God's assignments for your life. Boundaries are not about selfishness, they are about stewardship. God has given you resources, your time, your talent, your relationships, and it is your responsibility to manage them wisely. Setting boundaries begins with clarity about what truly matters to you. If you don't know your purpose, your values, or your priorities, it becomes easy for others to dictate them for you. People will pull you in 100 different directions, asking for your time, your help, or your attention, and before you know it, you're stretched so thin that you're ineffective in everything. But when you know what God has called you to do, you can make decisions with confidence. You can say no to what doesn't align with your purpose without feeling guilty, because you understand that every no to distraction is a yes to destiny. Boundaries require courage because they will not always be well received. People who have benefited from your lack of boundaries may resist when you start to enforce them. They may call you selfish, distant, or unkind, but their discomfort is not your burden to carry. Boundaries are not about controlling others, they are about taking responsibility for yourself. You cannot control how others respond to your boundaries, but you can control how faithfully you maintain them. It takes strength to stand firm, especially when faced with guilt trips, manipulation, or criticism. But remember, your allegiance is to God, not to the opinions of others. Boundaries also require consistency. It's not enough to set them once and hope that people will automatically respect them. You must reinforce them regularly with kindness, but also with firmness. Every time you allow someone to overstep your boundaries, you teach them that your words don't have weight. On the other hand, every time you uphold a boundary, you reinforce your commitment to honoring what God has placed in your life. Boundaries are like muscles. The more you use them, the stronger they become. Over time, people will learn to respect your boundaries because they will see that you respect yourself enough to enforce them. One of the most powerful boundaries you can set is with your time. Time is a gift from God, and how you use it reflects what you value. If you're constantly giving your time away to everyone who asks, you may find yourself with little left for the things that matter most: your relationship with God, your family, your health, or your calling. Prioritizing your time doesn't make you unkind or unhelpful, it makes you intentional. It allows you to serve from a place of fullness rather than depletion. You can give more effectively when you've taken the time to be refilled by God and to care for yourself. Boundaries also protect your emotional and spiritual health. Not everyone who wants access to you has good intentions. Some people bring negativity, criticism, or toxicity into your life, and it is not your responsibility to carry their burdens at the expense of your own well-being. Jesus himself modeled boundaries by stepping away from the crowds to pray, by choosing his disciples carefully, and by not allowing others to derail him from his mission. He loved everyone, but he didn't allow everyone the same level of access. You can love people while still protecting your peace and preserving your purpose. Healthy boundaries also teach others how to treat you. When you respect yourself enough to set and maintain boundaries, you send a clear message that you value your time, your energy, and your purpose. You show others that you are not a doormat to be walked on, but a child of God who understands their worth. This doesn't mean you're unkind or unwilling to help. It means you help in ways that are sustainable and aligned with your calling. People may not always like your boundaries, but they will come to respect them when they see that they are rooted in wisdom and love. Setting boundaries is not about closing yourself off from relationships. It's about creating space for the right relationships to flourish. When you clear out the distractions, the toxic influences, and the unnecessary commitments, you make room for meaningful connections and divine opportunities. You create an environment where your faith can grow, your purpose can thrive, and your relationships can deepen. Boundaries are not barriers. They are bridges to a life of balance, focus, and fulfillment. God honors boundaries because they reflect his order and wisdom. He set boundaries in creation, separating the day from the night, the land from the sea, and the seasons from one another. He set boundaries in relationships, instructing us to love our neighbors, but also to love ourselves. When you set boundaries, you are aligning yourself with His design, creating a life that is both fruitful and sustainable. Boundaries are not a rejection of others, they are an affirmation of what God has called you to steward. When we reflect on the power and necessity of living with intention, balance, and focus, it becomes clear that setting boundaries, embracing boldness, and walking in authenticity are not just optional elements of a fulfilled life, they are vital. God has placed within you everything you need to live a life that not only glorifies Him, but also brings you peace, joy, and purpose. Yet, too often we allow the distractions, demands, and expectations of others to pull us away from the path He has laid before us. This is not the life God desires for you. He did not create you to live in constant chaos, self-doubt, or exhaustion. He created you to live victoriously, fully aligned with His will, and unapologetically in your purpose. Think for a moment about the story of Jesus calming the storm. He was on the boat with His disciples when the winds and waves began to rage. The disciples were terrified, but Jesus was asleep, unbothered by the chaos around Him. When they woke Him in a panic, He spoke to the storm and said, "Peace, be still," and the storm obeyed. What stands out is not just the miracle itself, but Jesus' calm authority in the midst of turmoil. He was centered, focused, and aware of His power. That same peace and authority are available to you when you trust God and align your life with His principles. Setting boundaries, being bold, and living authentically are your ways of saying peace. Be still to the storms of life. The world will try to convince you that being everything to everyone is the way to live. It will praise you for overworking, overextending, and sacrificing yourself for the sake of others. But God's design for your life is different. He calls you to rest in Him, to trust Him, and to steward the gifts He has given you wisely. You cannot pour from an empty cup. You cannot fulfill your calling if you're constantly depleted. That's why it's so important to protect your time, your energy, and your peace. It's not about being selfish, it's about being faithful. Faithful to God, faithful to yourself, and faithful to the purpose He has placed within you. Boldness is not just about speaking up or taking risks, it's about living with the conviction that your life has meaning. It's about knowing that you are here for a reason, and that reason is bigger than the approval of others or the pursuit of temporary success. Boldness is what allows you to say yes to God even when it's scary, and no to distractions even when they seem appealing. It's what allows you to walk into rooms where you feel unqualified and still carry yourself with confidence because you know God has qualified you. Boldness is not arrogance, it's trust. Trust in the God who made you, who called you, and who will sustain you. Authenticity is your gift to the world. There is no one else who can do what you were created to do in the way that only you can do it. When you try to be someone else, you rob the world of the unique contribution only you can make. Authenticity requires vulnerability, but it also brings freedom. It allows you to live without the weight of pretending or performing, and it invites others to do the same. When you are authentic, you create space for real connection, genuine relationships, and meaningful impact. The world doesn't need more carbon copies, it needs the real you. And God has equipped you with everything you need to be that person fully and fearlessly. Boundaries are a reflection of your understanding of your worth. When you set boundaries, you are declaring that your time, energy, and purpose are valuable. You are affirming that you have the right to protect what God has entrusted to you, and that doing so is an act of obedience, not rebellion. Boundaries allow you to focus on what truly matters and to say yes to the things that align with your calling. They free you from the burden of trying to meet everyone's expectations and give you the space to thrive in your purpose. Boundaries are not about shutting people out. They are about letting the right people in while keeping the distractions out. In life, you will encounter resistance. There will be people who misunderstand your boldness, criticize your authenticity, or push against your boundaries. But remember, their discomfort is not your responsibility. Your responsibility is to stay faithful to what God has called you to do. You don't have to defend yourself or explain yourself to everyone. Let your life speak for itself. Let the fruit of your faithfulness, the evidence of your obedience, and the peace that comes from walking in God's will be your testimony. Over time, even those who doubted you will see the hand of God on your life. God has already equipped you for this journey. He has given you His Spirit to guide you, His Word to anchor you, and His promises to sustain you. You don't have to have all the answers or figure everything out on your own. All you need to do is trust Him, take the next step, and keep moving forward. When you walk in obedience, God will open doors that no man can shut. He will make a way where there seems to be no way. He will provide, protect, and promote you in His perfect timing. Your job is to stay faithful, stay focused, and stay true to who He created you to be. This is your time to rise. This is your time to step into the fullness of who you are. The world needs your light, your voice, and your purpose. Don't hold back. Don't shrink to make others comfortable or dim your light to fit into someone else's box. Be bold. Be authentic. Set boundaries. Live with intention. And above all, trust God. He has brought you this far, and He will take you even further. What He has started in you, He will complete. The best is yet to come, and your greatest days are ahead. Keep moving forward in faith, knowing that you are exactly where you need to be to fulfill the incredible purpose God has for your life.